Is Drake one of the world's greatest watch collectors? Or is he just smart at marketing luxury? He owns custom Jacob Co creations and rare Richard Mille masterpieces. But these watches do far more than tell time. So how did he turn luxury watches into million-dollar billboards? Let's find out. Now before we even get to the watches, Jacob Co did something most brands would never agree to. In late 2023, Jacob Co partnered with Drake's clothing label, October's Very Own, to release a piece that had nothing to do with telling time at all. It was a necklace shaped like an OVO owl, made in 14 karat gold and designed by Jacob Co. Now, think about that for a second. Jacob Co is a watchmaker with a reputation built over decades, and instead of just selling Drake a watch and hoping he wears it on camera, they let him fuse his own logo into their name. That's not a celebrity wearing a brand anymore, rather, it's a brand agreeing to become part of someone else's brand. But that necklace was just the appetizer, because once you start pulling on that thread, you find out Jacob Co has been building custom pieces for Drake that make the owl necklace look tame. And one of them has a feature so unusual, most people don't believe it's real until they see it moving. That piece is the Jacob Co Astronomia Casino. It's less of a watch and more of a tiny mechanical casino strapped to your arm. It has a functioning roulette wheel in classic red and black, sitting right there on the dial, spinning as part of the movement. More like the kind of design that has nothing to do with practicality and everything to do with making a statement. When Drake wears something like this, it's not really about knowing what time it is. It's about making sure everyone in the room and everyone watching the clip later knows exactly whose wrist that is. And this is where Jacob Co and Drake's brand really start to overlap. His whole persona is built on excess, spectacle, and a wink of humor about his own wealth. A roulette wheel on a watch fits that persona so perfectly, it's almost like the brand designed it with him in mind, which honestly might not be far from the truth. Drake has also been seen in the Jacob Co 5-time zone, a piece with a 3.25 carat diamond bezel that lets you track time across 5 regions at once. Useful if you're an international pop star, mostly just another excuse to wear a small fortune on your wrist. Now if you thought Jacob Co was the flashy one, wait until we get to what Richard Mille has built for him. Drake owns a Richard Mille RM 69 Erotic Tourbillon. This watch is one of only 30 ever made. It has a mechanism that's honestly hard to believe the first time you hear about it. 3 engraved rollers sit near the 12 o'clock position, and when you press a button, they rotate to reveal a randomly generated, let's say, adult-themed phrase. Another button lets the hour and minute hands retract so you can read what the rollers say. Half the entire movement is dedicated to this one gimmick. It's playful and exactly the kind of story that gets repeated in the comment sections and watch forums for years. This watch alone is valued at around $750,000, but the price isn't really the point here. The point is that a watch like this doesn't exist to tell time well, it exists to be talked about. And every time it shows up in a video or a paparazzi shot, it does its job perfectly. But even the RM69 isn't the most expensive Richard Mille and Drake's collection. There's one piece he saved for a very specific occasion. Do you know Drake owns a Richard Mille nobody can even agree how many exist? For his 35th birthday, Drake picked up a RM 056 Sapphire Split-Seconds Chronograph. This watch is a see-through sapphire crystal case that shows off the entire mechanism underneath. It's reported to be worth $5.5 million, and because the exact number in existence is genuinely disputed, there's basically no reliable public price list to compare it to. When something is that rare, the number isn't really set by a catalogue anymore, but by whoever's willing to pay for it. There's actually a pattern you'll notice across almost everything in Drake's collection. These aren't watches you walk into a boutique and order off a shelf. They're one of a few pieces, limited runs, or fully bespoke builds, which means the price gap between what a regular buyer might expect to pay and what these pieces are worth isn't a gap you can calculate. It's a number that exists nowhere on paper until someone like Drake decides to write the check. So how did an artist end up with this level of access to pieces most collectors will never even see in person? That's where his relationship with the brand's other big partnerships comes in. But before we get to why all of this matters, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Turns out Richard Mille didn't invent celebrity branding with Drake. This brand has spent years designing watches around athletes and personalities. They've built pieces engineered for their lifestyle. Drake owns the RM 035 Rafael Nadal America's Edition, limited to just 50 pieces. It was made with ultralight case designed to survive a tennis match. He also owns the RM 055 Bubba Watson, a golf-focused piece with a diamond-set bezel and a skeletonized movement built for shock resistance. Neither of these watches were made specifically for Drake, but by wearing them, he plugs himself into that same story of performance and exclusivity, minus the actual sport. It's a smart move, honestly. He gets to borrow the credibility of an athlete-engineered watch while wearing it in a completely different arena. The watch does double duty of telling Richard Mille's story and the story of Drake being part of an exclusive club that most people can't buy their way into, no matter how much money they have. Which brings us to the real reason none of this works like normal watch shopping. There's no price tag because there's often no listing at all. The OVO Owl necklace was limited edition. Even the Astronomia Casino is a speciality build. Same goes for the RM69 capped at 30 units and the RM 056 with only 5 in existence. When something is custom, off catalogue or produced in tiny numbers, it stops being a product with a fixed price and becomes an asset that's worth whatever the market decides at that exact moment. Regular collectors chasing the Drake watch find there's nothing to chase. In fact, the listing doesn't exist. The only way in is knowing the right people or being famous enough that the brand comes to you first. That's a very different kind of exclusivity than just being expensive. Lots of watches cost 6 figures and you can still walk in and buy one if you're patient. These pieces are different. They're proof that at a certain level of fame, the watch industry stops selling you a product and starts collaborating with you on one. And that collaboration is exactly why this whole thing works as marketing in the first place. Drake gets clout, Jacob & Co and Richard Mille get their name trending. Every time Drake shows up in a new custom Jacob & Co or Richard Mille piece, it doesn't just get talked about on watch forums. It'll be clipped, reposted, and dissected across social media by people who've never spent 5 figures on a watch in their life and never will. That's the trade. Drake gets to reinforce his image as the guy who has access to things nobody else can get. The brands have their name mentioned in the same breath as one of the biggest artists on the planet, right at the peak of his career. It's a strange kind of symbiosis. Jacob & Co and Richard Mille don't need traditional ads, when a single Instagram post or courtside camera shot can generate more buzz than a full marketing campaign. And Drake doesn't need to say a single word about the watch. The mystery does the work. People spend hours in comment sections trying to identify what he's wearing, which keeps both his name and the brand's name circulating for days. So where does that leave regular watch fans who just want in on some of this? This is less about watches and more about what fame can buy that money can't. At the end of the day, Drake's relationship with Jacob & Co and Richard Mille is not really about horology in the traditional sense. It's more of brands recognizing that a celebrity wearing the right custom piece at the right moment can outperform years of traditional advertising. And it's about Drake understanding that his wrist is one more surface he can use to reinforce the image he wants people to see. Will regular collectors ever get their hands on something like the RM 056 or the Astronomia Casino? But that's kind of the point. The unreachability is the marketing. As long as Drake keeps showing up in pieces nobody else can buy, the mystery keeps working in everyone's favor, his and the brand sitting on his wrist. And speaking of watches nobody else can get their hands on, our next video looks at limited edition pieces watch brands only make for Cristiano Ronaldo. If you thought Drake's collection was exclusive, wait until you see what the GOAT wears on his wrist.